Welcome. This series of videos is for students of Leaving Certificate Classical Studies. This video focuses on Roman town planning, which is a subtopic on the higher level course only. My narrative is based on a cover-to-cover reading of Wheeler's book, Roman Art and Architecture. Are you ready? Let's begin Roman town planning. Section 1, Early Influences in Italy. What Wheeler calls the Roman civic idea began in the city of Miletus during the 5th century BC, when, according to Aristotle, the architect Hippodamus laid out the city in a chessboard-like pattern, which came to be known as the Hippodamian grid. The first example of the Hippodamian grid, in mainland Greece, can be found in the city of Olynthus, in Macedonia. The Olyntian streets follow a regular grid-like pattern that affords space for rectangular insulae, or city blocks. The residential sector of Priene, which was built a century later in the 4th century BC, was imposed upon a steep hillside. The hill was actually terraced to accommodate the streets and the insulae. A lot of trouble was taken therefore to accommodate a Hippodamian town plan. This is why Wheeler calls Priene a tour de force of the Hippodamian scheme. The progress of town planning, however, came from Greece to Rome, through the Greek colonies in Magna Graecia, or southern Italy. For instance, we know that Hippodamus was active in planning the Athenian city of Thurii in the extreme south of Italy, during the 5th century BC. The city of Paestum, which lies southeast of Salerno, is Wheeler's first example of the Roman town. It serves as a nice introduction since both its Greek and later Roman phases are visible in the ruins of the city. There is some dispute as to the exact date of the planning of Paestum. Some put it to the Lucanian invasion, in circa 400 BC, when the local Oscan tribe drove out the Greek settlers. Others claim that the reorganizing of Macedonia, as it was then called, took place in 273 BC, when the city made an alliance with Rome and was renamed Paestum. Let's examine the Greek elements on the town plan first. There are 3 Greek temples, marked on the plan as A, B and C. All are peripteral, built in the Doric order, and they are set on the distinctive Greek 3-step podium. A was a temple of the Queen of the Gods Hera. This Hera was later converted into a basilica by the Romans after 273 BC. B was a hexastyle Poseidon, dedicated to the patron god of the city. Remember, the original Greek city was named Poseidonia after the Greek sea god. The temple remained unchanged except that it became sacred to the Roman sea god Neptune. C was a hexastyle Demetrion, a temple to the Greek corn goddess Demeter. Like the temple of Neptune, the Romans simply turned it into a temple to their own equivalent goddess, Ceres. Although Wheeler does not mention it, the area marked X on the plan is the site of the original Greek agora, or marketplace. Usually a large open space, unlike the enclosed Roman forum marked D on the plan. Moving on now to the Roman elements on the plan of Paestum, we can see clearly that the city is bisected by a street that runs on the north-south axis. It is marked as 1-1 on the plan. This is called the Cardo Maximus, the main Cardo. All the minor north-south streets are called Cardines. The Cardo is the main thoroughfare of the town and runs along the eastern side of D, the Forum. Transecting the city along an east-west axis and cutting the Forum along its southern side is the Decumanus Maximus, marked 2-2 on the plan. The 3 visible Decumani combined with the many Cardines clearly subdivided the city into a Hippodamian grid with rectangular insulae. The entire city is enclosed by a defensive wall punctuated with watchtowers, doubtless to keep careful watch on the sea and on the mountains. D, the Forum, is colonnaded on 3 sides but open along the Decumanus Maximus. The Forum was the commercial and political hub of the Roman town, playing host to temples, markets and administrative buildings. As mentioned earlier, the Romans continued to use the temples of Neptune and Ceres, but turned the temple of Hera into a basilica. They also utilized part of the original Greek agora as an amphitheater. The Cardo bisects its arena. Paestum is therefore a hybrid, a city that started off as Greek and became Roman. No discussion of Roman town planning would be complete without mentioning Pompeii, but it's important to note why Wheeler cites it in his commentary. Paestum was a Greek town that was Romanized. The Greek civic idea is clearly differentiated from the Roman one, so both are discernible from the ruins today, but at Pompeii the Roman civic idea dominates, making it more difficult to find the original Oscan nucleus from which it sprang. Pompeii was an Oscan town. Its main industry was textiles. It was essentially a market for wool. Pompeii was invaded by the Samnites, early Romans, at the end of the 5th century BC, and from then on began to expand on typically Roman lines in 2 directions, to the north, and to the east. As a result the Forum became periphery, but continued to be the administrative hub of Pompeii. Commercial interests however gravitated toward the two sets of central crossroads, to the northeast of the Forum. Owing to the lack of a central forum, the expansion in Pompeii is typically Hippodamian, rather than strictly Roman. Pompeii is an early Roman city when town planning was still influenced mainly by the Greek model. The insulae are typically rectangular, so the streetscape of Pompeii resembles Paestum. There are two main decumani. The southern one however is the Decumanus Maximus. It links the east-west road through the city. From the western city gate, it cuts through the Forum and continues on out through the eastern city gate. The decumani are intersected at regular intervals by cardines, one of which transects the Forum along the northeastern long side. But the main cardo, which brings the north-south road through the city gates and cuts the two decumani, is located in the middle of town. Hence the commercial sector of Pompeii shifted away from the Forum. The Forum at Pompeii was enclosed by a sheltered colonnade, and accessed by the Decumanus Maximus and the older cardo. You see? Romanizing this Oscan wall market was not so straightforward. The final phase of development occurred around 80 BC, during the reign of the dictator Sulla, when the city became a colonia of Rome. It was then encircled by a defensive wall, punctuated with regular watchtowers. Access to the city was controlled via gatehouses. The development of the city was stopped permanently in the early empire by the eruption of Vesuvius in AD 79, which entombed the city under a layer of pumice and ash. Alright? Now that the planning side is done, let's examine A. The Forum, on Wheeler's map. The main buildings are B. The covered market, where the Pompeians would have done their shopping. This was basically a shopping mall in the center of town. Next door to the market is C. The Temple of the Lares. The Lares were believed gods of the natural world. Nature deities, whose power was awesome. Every Roman home had its own lararium or shrine to the Lares. This was a temple to them. Next we come to D, which is an elongated basilica. It was an administrative building, that functions as both a town hall and as a courtroom. As you enter the building, your focus was drawn to the tribunal in an apse at the far end. Finally, E, is the Temple of Apollo, god of youth, vitality and the arts. The Forum is dominated on the northern end by the Capitalian or temple to the Capitoline triad of Jupiter, Juno and Minerva, the divine family of Rome. We now move on to the amenities of Pompeii. The citizens of Pompeii were not in want for things to do. Along the cardo of the new city, between the two main crossroads, we find two thermae, bath houses. They are called the Central and Stabian baths. The baths were generally free of charge and open to all citizens to use. The people at Pompeii were obviously a very clean and hygienic lot. The baths would have offered a means of relaxing after a hard day's work, a place to exercise, to meet one's neighbors and even do business. After a bath, the citizens of Pompeii could also shop in the arcades, get a snack in a thermopolium or fast food stall, and even stop into a taberna to wash it all down with a cup of wine and have a game of dice. One might, if one so desired, also go to one of the nearby brothels to indulge oneself. The Pompeian prostitutes seem to have catered for a wide variety of sexual appetites. Moving on down this functional cardo of the new town, we come to the theatre quarter, where the more cultured Pompeian might frequent one of the two Greek theatres. The larger one was built in the 2nd century BC. It is a typical Greek theatre for dramatic performances of comedy and tragedy, whereas the smaller of the two is a 1st century BC Odeon, for poetry recitals or musical performances. The most popular form of public entertainment however was to be found in the extreme northeastern corner of the city. Like other Roman cities, owing perhaps to the noise, traffic congestion and possibly the smell of decaying corpses and the heat, the Pompeians built their amphitheatre against the city wall. The amphitheatre is one of the first Roman amphitheatres to be built out of concrete rather than wood. A testament to how popular the Munera, or gladiator games were at Pompeii. In fact, the amphitheatre of Pompeii played host to a riot in 59 BC. It was the subject of a 3rd-star wall painting at Pompeii. Not content to watch the gladiators of Pompeii fight those from nearby Nicaria, the audience got involved and a riot broke out. It counts as one of the first recorded instances of sport hooliganism in history, and led to a 10-year senatorial ban on Munera in the Pompeian amphitheatre.